Hello there. Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to ask a short favor. If you're interested in either of the two books that I have written and am about to release, head on over to my website at theanxioustruth.com/books. There you can learn about both books, one of which is free, and you can get on my mailing list to be notified when each book is released and how you can get it. I would really appreciate that. Okay, let's get rolling. Welcome, dudes and dudettes. It is episode 101 of the podcast. We're on to our next 100 episodes. Let's see how long it takes me to do all those. So today we're going to talk about the selfish nature of anxiety. Anxiety being a selfish beast and how it relates to you being selfish or not selfish. This was suggested in my Facebook group. And if you're not in the group, by all means, pop in and join. Everybody's welcome. Just follow theanxioustruth.com/links. Will get you to all of my social stuff. There'll be a link to the Facebook group. If you're not in it, ask to join. We'll get you in. So anxiety being a selfish beast. A lot of people struggle with being looked at as selfish when they're dealing with an anxiety disorder, because anxiety by its very nature is selfish. It's self-centered. It craves attention. It craves reassurance. It craves soothing. It manufactures fear that demands to be front and center all the time. So many people who wind up in the grips of an anxiety disorder start to look really selfish to the outside world. To their friends and family, they start to look very different than they used to look. And selfishness, or being self-centered, or not caring about other people, is a criticism that's often hurled at people who are in that situation. And it's not necessarily fair, because it's not the person that's selfish, it's the disorder. The disorder is incredibly selfish. It's incredibly self-centered. It craves give me, give me, give me, give me, give me all the time. And it does change people's behavior. It does change people's personality to a certain extent, not permanently, but at least in the midst of the crisis of an anxiety disorder. You can quickly make the mistake of thinking that you are the center of the universe at all times. And people pick up on that. And often they will start to get annoyed at us when that happens. And rightly so. It's not up to anybody in the world to accommodate that kind of behavior. I say that all the time, and sometimes it's unpopular, but it's true, and we need to accept that. But let's talk about the idea of how anxiety is selfish and how it can make you start to look like a selfish person when by nature you are likely not a selfish person. You are not self-centered. You are not egocentric. You are not narcissistic. These are some of the things that I have heard hurled at anxious people over the years. Words like narcissism. And we should talk about that a little more depth, the idea of narcissism, because it is one of the things that I hear anxious people be accused of over and over and over, being narcissists. You are so narcissistic. Sometimes it's an ego thing, like, wow, you're so egocentric, like everything's about you. Or just often it's the word selfish. So let's explain that mechanism and what's kind of going on and how it means that you will look to be a different person than who you likely really are. So when you are in a situation where you have learned to be afraid of how you feel and what you think, you are afraid of the things your body does, and you are afraid of the thoughts in your mind. And you begin to associate those feelings in your body and those thoughts in your minds to specific places or tasks or contexts or situations. And you begin to live your life in order to avoid those places that you associate with fear. So for people who have panic disorder, people who have agoraphobia, who are really my primary audience most of the time, you understand how that mechanism works. You begin to retreat from the places where you felt badly. I can't go back to that place now because I felt anxious there. I was afraid there. I panicked there. I can't go there. And you begin to modify your lifestyle to work around this thing. I don't want to feel these things again, so I'm not going to do that thing that I just did that made me panic. I'm not going to talk to this person because it made me panic. I'm not going to go to this place because it made my anxiety spike up. It sent my anxiety through the roof. I don't want to have to face this particular thing because it sends my brain all crazy and I can't help myself. Like, these are phrases that are probably familiar to you. You have probably said them. You may have said them today whenever you're listening to this, right? So that's super common. And what it means is that you start to, when you are constantly scanning the world for threats, you are constantly on the lookout for threats to what you think are your safety. What will make me feel badly? What will make me panic? What will make me have those anxious thoughts? What will make my brain go all crazy and I won't be able to help it, and I'll just go down the rabbit hole of anxious and fearful, irrational thoughts? Like when you're constantly scanning and on guard for what you started to call triggers, right? We all know the word triggers. When you're constantly on guard and scanning and looking and on the lookout for the next trigger and trying to avoid it, we cannot have any triggers happen. I must not expose myself to triggers. I must not let them in my life. I must avoid them. I must retreat from them. You start to live a very, very, very different life than you used to live. So this is not news to anybody. And it does start to impact the people in our lives, our partners, our spouses, our children, our coworkers, our friends, everybody, right? It has an impact on everybody. When you stop doing things, when you start avoiding, when you start making excuses, when when you're imposing that, I'm going to put me in that because I used to be that too. So I understand. When we are imposing that on the world around us, people begin to form opinions, and they see like, well, okay, this is another family event that we can't go to, or it's another family event, or it's another social event that you're going to miss. So it's yet another birthday party that you won't come to. We all know, I don't have to go through the long list here, but people begin to form opinions on that. And so you can't help but impact the people around you when we start to go into that mode. So here's what's going on in terms of the selfish thing. Like, why is anxiety selfish? Well, anxiety is selfish because it begs for attention all the time. It begs for attention constantly. It wants to be front and center all the time. If you are awake, anxiety wants to be right at the front of the line in terms of what is important to you, what you're engaging with, what you're talking about, what you're thinking about, what you're reacting to, what you're trying to accommodate. Anxiety is always at the front of the line. Anxiety and fear, right? Those, they hold hands and they stand right at the front of the line, and everybody else be damned. You guys will have to wait. We want. That is the nature of an anxiety disorder, because you have to be constantly vigilant. I must be on guard. I better be careful what I eat. I better be careful what I drink. I better be careful what I watch on TV. I better be careful what I listen to. Will something come up that might make me have to go to the supermarket? Oh no, what if somebody has a birthday or an anniversary, or heaven forbid, there's a wedding or a funeral that I have to go to? You're constantly scanning for threats. What you have started to determine are threats to you. They're not, and that's part of recovery, is learning that they're not. But when you're in that situation, you are constantly scanning for those threats. So yes, the attention that anxiety craves first and foremost is scan for threats, scan for threats, scan for threats. So the first form of attention that anxiety and fear is asking for all the time is a safety thing. Be on guard, be on guard, be on guard. And so you evaluate every context, every situation, everything that comes up, every event, you evaluate it in the context of safety, your own safety. Will I be okay doing this? So that puts, boom, right away, anxiety has come to the front of the line when it comes to anything that enters your field of view or comes into your life. Front of the line, anxiety. Is this going to be okay for me to do? Will I be okay when I do this? So that's the first form of attention that anxiety is begging for all the time, right? It's begging for that all the time. And when we get into the grips of an anxiety disorder like panic disorder or agoraphobia or monophobia or health anxiety, those kind of things, then we accommodate it. We start to listen. We make the mistake of believing it. We have mistakenly linked how we feel and what we think to safety and danger when that's a wrong link. And then we start to accommodate that desire for that's the first filter of everything. The very first filter everything gets passed through is the anxiety and fear filter. So that's the first way that anxiety goes to the front of the line in your life and starts to exhibit as selfishness or self-centeredness. Or in some cases, people will call it narcissism, right? Because everything gets turned into being about you. The second way that anxiety starts to, there's three ways here that I want to talk about. The second way that anxiety and fear go to the front of the line and make you act in what appears to be a selfish way is deciding that you must immediately, first, you're going to scan for safety and threats. Second of all, when you wind up in a situation, now the situation itself becomes irrelevant for the most part, and the way everybody else views the situation, be it a social event or a conflict with your partner. Everybody has arguments now and then, or, a problem with a child or a health problem, whatever it is. Like, whereas everybody else is dealing in the context of the actual problem, the actual situation. How do we solve a problem? How do we get through this? How do we enjoy ourselves at this event? How do we travel to this event? Everybody else is thinking that way. You are evaluating the event in terms of, how is this making me feel? That's the second way that anxiety goes to the front of the line and demands your attention and turns you into what looks like a selfish person, even though you are likely not a selfish person. How is this making me feel? How do I feel right now? How is this about me? So that's where the narcissism starts to come in. Because while everybody else is focused on the situation at hand, be it positive, negative, stressful, happy, whatever it is, everybody else is engaging with the situation. You immediately begin to engage with yourself again. How is this making me feel? How is it going to make me feel? Hey, that's great. Cousin Joe is getting married. Everybody else is happy about going to a wedding and seeing each other. And your thought is, hey, Cousin Joe is getting married. Uh-oh, how is this going to make me feel? What's this going to do for me? Is it going to make my anxiety spike? Am I going to panic? So immediately, anxiety and irrational fear, again, boom, right to the front of the line. Everybody else go to hell. Like, we don't care about Cousin Joe. We don't care about the event. We don't care about what everybody else is thinking about. Me, 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 me. That's not you talking. That's the anxiety disorder talking. That's the mistaken cognitive link between how you feel, what you think, and being safe or unsafe, as the case may be. That is the disorder talking. And that looks incredibly selfish. The disorder itself is, in fact, incredibly selfish. And when you follow it, when you let it dictate you and drag you around, you start to look selfish. So constantly evaluating every situation. First, is it a threat? And can I avoid it? Is it a threat and can I avoid it? First thing, right? And changing plans and escaping and retreating and modifying what's going on in your life and the lives around you. That's the first way. And the second way is the one I'm just talking about. Like, okay, now I'm in the situation. I didn't avoid it. I can't avoid it. There's nothing I could do to run and escape from it. So instead of dealing with the actual situation, let me turn it into what it makes me feel like. And I've seen this happen time and time again. And I was that person too. I was in that situation. I understand all of this. I was there. I did that too. Like, conflict with a client or a vendor at work or a problem with, one of my kids getting sick. And, I might have to, how about this? I will tell you this. One of my daughters, my kids were young when I was going through this. And one of my daughters got sick. I mean, she wasn't seriously sick. She just got sick like kids get sick. And I had to go, it was up to me. She needed a prescription. She had an earache. The poor kid was in pain. We needed to get her the medicine that she needed. Not a huge deal for most people, right? For me, a huge deal. And I made getting the medication for my daughter that she needed, which was literally 1.5 miles down the road from me, no more than a 10-minute to 15-minute there and back with what she needed. I'm her dad. I have to get her what she needs. I made that all about me. Somehow that came about me. How would I feel? Was this going to make me panic? Was I going to panic when I went to do that? So yeah, like I know what I'm talking about because I live that too. And so when you get into a situation where, well, now I'm in a situation that I can avoid, I'm in it with these other people. You know what? If you're in the situation yourself, you're not really impacting anybody, and then nobody's going to think of you as selfish. But you may begin to think of yourself as selfish, and that's valid too. You may start to get down on yourself because, wow, why am I being so selfish? I'm not normally like this. This is why. Because first you scan to see, is this thing going to be a threat and can I avoid it and impose my avoidance and my escape behaviors on the people around me? Not to mention yourself. You feel that too. And now I'm in the situation, and instead of actually engaging with the situation, all I want to engage in is, how is this making me feel? Me. How's it going to make me feel? And I hear people all the time. I got into an argument with my husband, and he doesn't understand, like, my anxiety is through the roof now. Okay. So you got into an argument over whatever. Somebody left the lid off the cap of the toothpaste tube, and that turned into my anxiety is through the roof. So that is the disorder, acting incredibly selfish. The disorder will put you at the center of the universe. It puts itself at the center of the universe, and therefore somehow or other, when you are stuck in the middle of these problems that I talk about all the time, that I used to have, that you have right now, you wind up inadvertently putting yourself at the center of everything all the time. And sometimes people will get annoyed and fed up and lose their patience with that, and they will throw that at you. You may have had this happen already. How come everything is about you? How come everything is about you? Now, the third thing that I want to talk about is the sneaky selfishness of anxiety. And anxiety is sneaky. It is, and fear. Anxiety and fear, in the context of an anxiety disorder that we're talking about here all the time, they are sneaky, they are resourceful, they are clever. They will try to get what they want by almost any means. And here's the sneaky, subtle, insidious sort of selfishness that begins to grate on people after a while. We have to accept that this is what's going on. Like, it's important to know these things so that we can work on as we go down the road for recovery, we can understand what's going on here and start to address them. The sneaky selfishness of anxiety is this: I want you to soothe me and distract me and make me feel better whenever I feel wobbly. If I'm a little afraid, I'm feeling anxious, something I don't like, I had a fear spike, I might panic. Anxiety is going to ask for reassurance, for soothing, for attention. Tell me it's okay. Make me feel better. Make me feel better, world, whoever that is, partner, husband, spouse, friend, whoever. Make me feel better right now. And so the sneaky part, and like kind of the clever snake in the grass selfishness of anxiety, is when it will compel you to seek that reassurance even after people have grown weary of reassuring you. And it will understand, well, I can't ask this person again, or I can't ask my support group again this question because I can't ask my therapist this question. Excuse me, you may have been told this by your therapist if you have a good therapist. Like, we're not going to talk anymore about your symptoms. Like, a good behavioral therapist will let you do that a little bit, and then we'll say, we're not going to talk about your symptoms anymore. You can't tell me anymore about your heartbeat or your breath, or you can't tell me those things. And that's valid. Right? They're trying to point you in a productive direction. But when those avenues of soothing and reassurance and safety seeking and like just attention seeking, and attention as a safety behavior, by the way, when I say that your anxiety and fear seeks attention, I don't mean it seeks attention because it has a big ego and needs to be told it's pretty or smart. What I mean is that your anxiety and fear causes you to seek attention as a safety behavior. I just want to say how I feel again for the 700th time today, just because it seems safer if I speak it to somebody and hand it to somebody. So anxiety and fear always wants you to drag some other human being into the feeling with you. And that's not an ego thing. So people will say, like, you're such an egomaniac. Why do you always talk about yourself? It's not an egomaniac thing at all. It's almost the opposite. It's like an extreme measure of fragility. There's a huge amount of vulnerability and fragility happening there. And so what you do when you're doing that, when anxiety and fear compels you to seek, I must speak this into the world so that somebody can hold it for me and soothe me and reassure me, or just know, just in case, okay, somebody better know that my heart is beating so that they can call an ambulance when I need it. That's not ego. So those people are wrong. They think it's ego because they think all you want to do is talk about you. They think you're a narcissist because you turn everything back on you, but really and truly, it's the opposite. Like, you are in a state of extreme fear and feeling vulnerable and fragile, and you're trying to soothe that. They don't understand that. But in the end, it does start to appear incredibly selfish. And the sneaky part of it is when you know that you can't keep overtly doing it to the people around you. They won't tolerate it anymore. And you begin to sort of slyly think you're going to slide it in here. That can be really tough. So do I want to have an interaction with this person just because I want to have an interaction with this person? Or am I feeling a little bit upset right now and things that I don't like to feel? And I'm looking for some distraction. And even though I'm not going to tell the world what I'm feeling, I'm really covertly telling the world what I'm feeling. So I know that's really subtle, but that's another part of the selfish nature of anxiety disorder is anxiety and fear. Like, I did it. I used to do that. And I had to own that. Like, I see what I'm doing here. I think I'm working around the restrictions. But, in the end, the people in your life will understand that, I know what you're doing. It will tell lies. It will make things up. Anxiety and fear will start conversations, whether they're real conversations or in a figurative sense, that you really have no interest in being in. You just want to be in some conversation because it soothes you. And that's difficult because now you may not be specifically saying, can we talk about my heartbeat again? Or can we talk about these thoughts in my head again? Or can we talk about my fear of being alone, or whatever it is that your big issues are? You're not demanding to specifically talk about those things anymore at this point, but you kind of are. Like, what you're basically saying is, well, what I really wanted was your attention, and now I still want your attention. I'll just try and do something different to get it. But really, I'm still doing that. That's super subtle. I understand that. But over the long term, that's the sneaky, sort of insidious snake in the grass selfishness of anxiety and panic and agoraphobia and the things we talk about all the time. So you have to be aware of those too, because people will see those and then they'll start to form that negative opinion, misguided though it may be. So I think, just to recap, like, there are 3 ways that anxiety and fear are selfish when you are not. Number one, it causes you to evaluate the entire world in terms of what the potential threat is to your safety, whether it's physical, mental, whatever it is. And then it makes you try to find avoidance, escape, and all kinds of crazy Rube Goldberg re-engineering behaviors to get around those things. So you want to modify your life and avoid things, and that has an impact on the people around us. It does. So that's the first way. That anxiety goes to the front of the line and starts to act super selfish and make you look selfish, even though you're not. The second way is when you can avoid something, you're in a situation that just comes up. You're not able to engineer your way around it. Life happens to us. And instead of engaging with the situation, you immediately turn it into, how is this making me feel? What is this going to do for my anxiety? What will this do to my anxiety? That's anxiety and fear pushing to the front of the line in front of every other issue that there is. Doesn't match what anybody else's experience, but I want to be at the front of the line. What will this do for me? How is this going to make me feel bad? Will this make me feel badly? I hate this. This is making me feel badly. That's the second way. And the third way is the quiet way. Like, well, everybody's getting a little tired of me, so I have to find creative new ways to seek out attention from my fear, to like surreptitiously soothe my fear, to surreptitiously put my fear into someone else's hands because I want them to hold it. Like, those are the 3 ways that anxiety and fear will push their way to the front of the line all the time. They will act like they are the center of the universe, and that therefore makes you look like you think you are the center of the universe. I know you don't think that you are the center of the universe. The people closest to you in your life know that that is not really you. They understand that. They may start to get frustrated because they know that you know better and they can't understand what's going on here. Why is suddenly everything about you? And that's where these conflicts begin to arise, because they start to see you as selfish or self-centered or egocentric or narcissistic at the worst. And these are conflicts that, we're trying to deal with some issues here. Those are conflicts that just pile on top of that and make it feel even worse, right? Yet another thing to deal with. Like, doesn't he understand what I'm going through right now? Doesn't he understand? Why does he think I'm so selfish? No, he doesn't understand. He doesn't have to understand. Nobody is required to understand irrational fear. So, if you're looking for, well, then what do I do with all this? That's great, Drew, but what do I do with all this? First, knowing and accepting what's going on is a big part of that. You have to understand that to the outside world, you do look selfish to the outside world. You do. I looked incredibly selfish and self-centered. The world revolved around me 24/7. I know that. So you have to accept and validate to a certain extent the frustration that people are feeling. If you're not dealing with an anxiety disorder and you're a very giving person and you don't think about yourself and you're very charitable and you're very compassionate and kind and always doing, then somebody leveling, the acquisition of selfishness, self-centeredness, and narcissism at you would be patently absurd. And you may defend against that and say, well, wait a minute, what would make you think that? That's not fair to say that to me. But when you are in the grips of an anxiety disorder and someone levies, you're very self-centered at you, unfortunately, we have to take a pause for a second. Instead of saying, oh my God, that was a terrible thing to say to me. He doesn't understand. Oh my God, he's piling on top of me. You have to stop for a second and say, well, wait a minute here. I have this anxiety problem. I have this fear, this irrational fear problem. Is this making me act kind of selfish? That's what you have to ask. And as everything, as always, when it comes back to, and the things that I talk about on the podcast here, as always, the way out of this is to actually work on recovery. Like, this isn't an issue where you could just say, well, I'll just stop acting selfish then. Okay, I see what I'm doing. I won't do that. Okay, that's an awesome plan. That's really a good plan. Like, I'm going to catch when I do that, and I'm going to try really hard not to do that. That is an awesome plan. I would highly recommend that you start to implement that plan. But guess what that plan is? That plan is recovery. It's part of recovery. It's part of your recovery plan. Like, you cannot like start to ignore the fact that anxiety and fear are screaming for attention and act differently, go against what it's telling you to do without actively facing the things that you fear. That's part of facing the fear. So you can be aware that you're acting differently because your anxiety disorder is compelling you to act differently. And the way to fix that is not to demand that the rest of the world stop calling it out. The way to fix that is to understand that the fact that the world is calling us out on this behavior is a call to action. It's a red flag. It's a pointer. It's a teaching moment for us. Like, oh, I am acting this way. This is something I have to work on changing. And in the end, changing that really does involve, like, unfortunately, it involves like starting to drop those behaviors and face the fear and go into it and do the work. So it's way easier to acknowledge it and say, I know this looks super selfish to you. I'm starting to understand why I'm acting this way. And here are the things that I am doing to start to change it. So what I would appreciate you do, friend, coworker, husband, wife, whoever, child, is instead of calling me selfish, can you just point out when I keep turning back into myself? That's a constructive conversation to have. Like, instead of just getting angry and calling me selfish, which I understand why you're angry with me, it would be more helpful to me while I start to do this recovery work if you just point out when I'm doing it again. That would be super helpful. That's a good conversation to have. And then you got to get home and actually doing the work. So you can't really solve this problem of being seen as selfish without actually starting to move forward in your recovery and doing that work. So that's it. That is my take on anxiety and why people will start to call you selfish and look at you as selfish or self-centered or egocentric or narcissistic. You're not. I know you're not. If you're listening to me, I know you're not a selfish person, but the disorder is incredibly selfish, and it will compel you to act like a selfish person would act or a self-centered person would act, even if that is not in your nature. I get that. I really, 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 really get that. And there you go. So that's episode 101 on the selfish nature of anxiety and fear. What can I tell you? I'm going to take you out here. First, I'm going to ask you, follow theanxioustruth.com/links gets you to all the social, right? So join the Facebook group and all that stuff. We invite everybody in. And the second thing is, if you are listening on iTunes or a podcast network that lets you rate the podcast, please rate the podcast 5 stars, whatever, review it, write a little paragraph. It helps other people find it, which is great. It spreads the message. And that's it. I will be back next week with yet another topic that I have yet to determine, but we'll figure it out as we go. And I'm going to leave you, as always, with Afterglow by my friend Ben Drake. Facebook.com/Ben Drake Music. Give Ben a listen and tell him I sent you. Later, peeps.
Yeah, you're on your way. It's in the afterglow. It's in the lyrics of the songs we know. It's in these feelings that you never show. Yeah, you're doing fine. It's all around you, you can breathe it in. And this is where your story begins. You got the feeling that you're gonna win. Yeah, you're doing fine. Now in the city and you're living
Hey, what's up, guys? Drew here. In the 5 years that I've done the podcast, I've never had a sponsor. But now it's time for me to put in a little plug for the day job, the business that I own. And that business is Managed WordPress Hosting. So if you have a website and it runs WordPress, and you'd like WordPress hosting that makes WordPress faster, more secure, and way easier than you ever imagined it would be, then check out Helix. You can find us online at imhelix.com. That's IAMHELIX.com. We took a long time to build Helix. I'm super proud of it. It works spectacularly. We take really good care of our customers, and I promise we would take really good care of you too. So if you're in the market for WordPress hosting that will blow your mind, check out Helix. I would appreciate the consideration. I thank you for coming by and listening, and I'll see you the next time.